playing a show tomorrow night. 2 shows.
Correct, at the Regatta Bar at the Charles Hotel, which I understand is one of the jazz joints in town, the other being Scullers,
Yes.
I think. Yeah, we're at the Regatta Bar. I think the shows are 8 and 10, I think.
8 and 10, yes, indeed.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I brought over an English band to be with me. We're just doing a little East Coast thing down through Providence tomorrow. We'll be at The Call in Providence, Rhode Island on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And then on to Birdland in New York City, which is one of your country's most famous jazz joints. So it's a long way from Yes to Birdland.
Yes, indeed. And how many dates are you playing on this tour?
Oh, very few. 5, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick trip to the States. But, we jazz guys on the whole don't tour in quite that sense.
Right.
There are always gigs of some sort or another, so you never really quite stop.
Right.
We'll be in the Czech Republic shortly, and we'll be also in Bulgaria and the Slovakia Republic and Republic of Slovakia, rather, and all over the place. So it's the same tour I've been on since I was a kid.
And when you, how old were you when you started playing drums? And were drums your first instrument?
Yeah, sure. I was very young, maybe 13, and I started playing just on a snare drum. And, with my sister gave me a pair of brushes and said if you swish those round on the back of an album sleeve, thick card album sleeve, they sound really good, just like a drum. So I learned to play with brushes first, then sticks on the snare drum, and then built up a drum set that way.
And I've always wanted to know, did you have any... obviously, you were in bands before, before Yes.
Well, no professional bands. I'd done very little playing before Yes. Yes was the first group I'd been in, and, I hadn't really done kind of bar mitzvahs and weddings and stuff. At all, it was my first professional gig, really.
I actually read that you did a very brief sitting in with Savoy Brown.
I did, yeah. I was their regular drummer for 3 nights, and then I was fired.
Oh.
I'm very proud of that, actually. For messing around too much with the rhythm, which showed early promise, I thought. Early talent. Because, their rhythm only went gong, 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 gong. So we messed around with that, and I got thrown out.
Tired of playing shuffles, huh?
A little tired, yeah.
And, what was I going to ask you? Now, did you start off playing jazz, or...
Yeah, I grew up with jazz, actually. In England, we had a lot of great American footage, black and white footage, of all the great American jazz stars on national television at 6:25 every Saturday night, which was great. And so, I'd seen Parker and Sonny Stitt and Art Blakey and Miles and Freddie Hubbard and all those guys at the age of 13, 14 on British television, national TV, and it was a program called Jazz 625. And it was great, and the American stars came through London, and they were all filmed by the BBC. Great sound, great recording, great camera angles. You could see everything.
Right.
And so by the mid-'60s, I was kind of hooked. And I went to a school, and the older guys had a jazz quartet, and they were leaving the school, and they needed to teach the kid, So I learned to go ting, ting, ting on a cymbal, jazz style, before I learned to play any kind of rock or pop music.
Right. And how do you find the? I guess then you were in obviously Yes and King Crimson, and then after Crimson, you did your own thing for a while. How did you? What was the? Did you have a drive to sort of play more jazz after King Crimson, or kind of branch out and do your own thing? What was sort of the impetus to go back in that direction?
I mean, by the age of 18, I thought I was going to be a jazz player, and I was at a university in Leeds in England, and it was a good jazz club, and I went out and I saw Gary Burton and Roy Haynes and stuff, and I played in the university group, and everything was cool, and I thought I would do that. But it was 1967, 1968, which in Europe was a big time. There were the sort of May riots in Paris in 68, and it was just post-Beatles. Post Sgt. Pepper, and everybody you could do whatever you wanted. And the rock scene was really exciting. And all the London drummers just sort of fell into, they were all jazz players, because the jazz players were always better than the rock players. Right. And the jazz players, like Peter, I knew him as Peter Baker, but otherwise Ginger Baker.
Right.
And Ainsley Dunbar, who worked with Frank Zappa for a while, Mitch Mitchell, who was doing his kind of Elvin Jones with Jimi Hendrix. These were all London drummers. I was just the next guy in line. And we all just fell rather into the more exciting, red-blooded, chaotic world of rock music. Whereas the jazz world was not very attractive. It was very political. It was very kind of, the communists had taken over. It was out there music. It was atonal, squeaky bump music. So a lot of the guys just fell into, the growing rock scene with all the mayhem that was going on. And me too, and we just formed this band, Yes.
Right. It's funny, I've always felt that way listening to, some of the great British rock drummers, of the 60s, that I've always felt, one of the great things they had was sort of a jazz flavor to their rock style.
Sure. They'd all grown up with jazz one way or another,
Right.
and were studio musicians of some sort. That's quite distinct from the other type of drumming that was going on in England, which you could call beat drumming, which would be the Kinks and the Rollings. Well, no, Charlie was a jazz drummer.
Sure.
The beat drummers were more associated with the Liverpool sound and kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah, as the name says, it was your basic backbeat, really.
Yeah, a funny kind of unsexy thing. You hear it today in Oasis and, Blur and Pulp. And these British groups, there's no real deep pocket to it. It's just a sort of up and down, 2 and 4, like nobody really cares. And I always found that a curiously unappealing kind of music for that rhythm. I can't get into it. There's no groove there. There's no depth to the groove. So I might really like Oasis or Blur or Pulp if I could only get past the groove, which I can't locate.
Right.
I'm sure they're great, but I can't listen unless it has a thing.
Who would you say would be one of your biggest influences as far as jazz drummers growing up?
Well, I grew up...
Did you ever have a chance to see them live?
I grew up with all the great American players,
Right.
it was a list as long as my arm. And of
Right.
course, I tracked them all down. And of course, I'd done all my serious listening by the time I was 16, 17. That we had no age limit in London clubs. In other words, if you were 15, you could go to a London club. It didn't matter. There was no drink policy or anything like that.
Right.
And, by a very young age, I'd seen the Duke Ellington Orchestra. I'd seen, Buddy Rich. I'd interviewed Buddy Rich, no less, as an 18-year-old. I'd seen Roy Haynes, and on TV, that's live, and I'd seen, Billy Higgins and everybody, Ronnie Scott's.
Did you ever get a chance to see Danny Richmond with
I did.
Charles Mingus?
I did see Danny Richmond with Charles Mingus, fun enough. Great, too. Really exciting. Sure. With his rather nice little kind of neckerchief, very colored, very nicely dressed man.
How do you prefer playing? I know now with this with the jazz, with Earthworks, you're playing in, say, the Regatta Bar and smaller venues, as compared to, say, places like the Orpheum in Boston or places that modern day King Crimson would play. How do you prefer the small venues?
Well,
to the,
different strokes for different folks, and the music is designed for. Put it another way, the way the music is designed demands a certain kind of room.
Right.
Or the room that the music's going to be played in demands a certain kind of music. I mean, the reason why Pink Floyd play so slowly, painfully slowly, their fastest tempo is about 60 beats per minute. 1, 2. This is Pink Floyd burning out. 3. Is because they play such huge rooms, and it takes time for the sound to translate to the back of these rooms, and it makes sense. If you want to play jazz, which is a rapid, fast-moving, tends to be a fast-moving, intricate, and very adept, light-footed game, then it's not going to work past about 500, 800 people, because by definition the sound's going to get lost.
Right.
So little rooms are fine by me. I prefer them personally, but that's because I want to play the kind of music that now fits in little rooms.
Right. I've noticed what I found quite enjoyable when I saw you with King Crimson back in '95. You had a definite dynamic sense on the snare drum, and in if you want to call King Crimson rock in a rock context, I find it very rare to see people actually playing with dynamics on the snare drum. Most rock guys I find just bash away from left field and get a really terrible sound.
Yeah.
for my money.
Yeah, me too. I've never quite liked that at all. You know, there are a number of things drummers do, but one of the most important things they do surely is control the dynamics within the group.
Right.
And if you're going to take that away from a drummer, you know, and it's just a little unsexy for me.
Right.
You know, it's like driving a car at 100 miles an hour all the time. I mean, it's much more fun to drive it at 50 miles an hour than go flat out for a couple of miles, then throttle back. You know, the art of the seduction is important here for a drummer's point of view. You know,
Right.
you can't hit people over the head the whole time. I mean, what's the point here? You know, you need to shock them and surprise them. And certainly a glimpse of power, a glimpse of flat out is essential, you know, once every 15, 20 minutes. But the thing is to keep the listener on the edge of his or her seat, I think, you know, to display control, and then let them have it every now and once in a while. And I think that's more exciting than the flat out. And, you know, I regret the loss of dynamics in drumming. That comes from FM radio formatted play, you know, where even the ballad is played the same loud as the...
Right.
It's always played the same flat dynamic because that suited the radio stations better. And I remember a memorable, exciting day in Los Angeles in a big white stretch limousine with some record company guy from Atlantic Records who was going to hear the group's new album in 1973 called Lark's Tongues in Aspic. And he came on the radio, you know, and we were driving along the freeway, and then suddenly there appeared to be silence, out of which emerged a little tinkling bell sound followed by a kalimba or a thumb piano. This was so microscopically quiet, and this guy couldn't hear it, you know, and he thought the whole thing had gone wrong, and that the radio station wasn't playing it loud enough. And then, of course, the band burst in, and he had to jump up and turn the volume down. And of course, we were doing it all wrong. We were doing it all wrong. We still had dynamics. We had the dynamics of a symphony orchestra,
Right.
which is not permissible in American format.
Radio even unfortunately discourages all that with all of their compressors and so forth. I'm sure that there was some device trying to bring the little bell up and flatten the rest of it.
Yeah, it didn't work. That's right. And you know, there isn't much in the way of dynamics in rock. So there used to be. But rock has become, for people like me, a fairly inhospitable place because there's not much I can do. You know, once you've been with King Crimson, which is one of the great rock gigs for a drummer, because it has a wide open, carte blanche kind of territory that you can work in. Once you've played with that, or maybe with Peter Gabriel, there's not a whole lot else that you're going to look around to do. There just isn't much that you can do in rock drumming to move people or surprise things or push things forward a bit. So necessarily people like me go back maybe or sideways towards jazz, which of course is where the cutting edge of this stuff happens.
Right.
I was impressed with the ensemble of drums you had surrounding you in those days when I saw you in '73. You really didn't see rock drummers with an array of percussion instruments hanging around and so forth around the set.
Percussion is part of the European tradition very much, you know, and we always had percussion and thought of ourselves as percussionists, I think, of which the kit drums was part of it. I also played, a little earlier on this afternoon, you played a little bit of my mallet or vibraphone or marimba playing on a tune called If You Can't Stand the Heat.
Right.
So I used to double on glockenspiel vibes and marimba and so forth, somewhat, although I was no great expert. And also there would be steel plates and thunder sheets and scraping sounds and chains and, you know, stuff. We liked all that. We thought that was nice.
Have you ever tried your hand at hand percussion such as tablas?
No, funnily enough, I've left all that completely alone. I respect it way too much. That's another whole science, you know, and there's only so many hours in the day, I think.
Right. I've also found that in a lot of rock music and even some jazz, I've found that you're one that really knows how to tune a snare drum to make it sound good. And I really find in a lot of music that I listen to just so many bad snare sounds, and to me it seems like, are people really hearing, or they just get carried away by the emotion, so they're not really concerned with the technique. And
there's not a lot of technique. There's some interesting techniques involved in rock,
right.
But deriving many sounds from the snare drum is not one of them.
Right.
You're only required to produce one sound, and that may well be sampled on day one of the album and then put throughout the album. So it has this consistency. Nobody wants any change. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to get scared if the snare drum goes quiet for a minute or
Right.
anything like that. Whereas I'm so old that I grew up with the understanding that you would be able to control a snare drum from a very quiet dynamic to a very loud dynamic,
Right.
and be able to play it in between all those shades.
Mhm.
And so that's what we did in rock groups. I didn't know that you weren't allowed to do that, but now you're not allowed to do that.
Mhm. How do you feel that I know you've tried your hand at the electric kit for a while. What do you feel the advantages are of the electric kit compared to, say, the acoustic kit?
Well, I spent a lot of time with the electronic set. A lot of time, about 15 years really, from early 80s to mid 90s,
Mhm.
and got a lot out of it. It nearly killed me because of the time it took and the unreliability of the equipment. And of course, the problem with anybody in King Crimson is that there is always a new bit of gear, and that new bit of gear will never quite do what the manufacturer says it will do,
Sure.
and it will never ever do what the musician wants it to do. So it always ends up breaking,
Right.
or failing, or causing a buzz in the PA system. And the early electronic drums were just horrible beasts, really difficult to do. But you could, if you were patient, get some amazing things out of it. And there were tracks of King Crimson I could cite you 2 or 3, like, for example, Industry, which was a metal klangfarben kind of chaos track. I could cite you Waiting Man, which was pitch drums. I could cite you all sorts of tunes, which were fundamental, which were given life by the electronic drum set, and which would not have occurred without that particular instrument.
Right.
Later on, with Earthworks, I've been able to play chords and tunes and melodies on electronic pads, and very amazing it is too. But the problem with all sophisticated electronics is that it comes in between you and the listener. Somehow the listener is aware that there is a separation between you and him.
Right.
If the quickest form of communication is the human voice,
Right.
like now, like you're getting what I'm saying right away now, direct communication, and perhaps one step down from that is, say, a saxophone, tenor saxophone, then electronic drums are so far down that particular food chain, in terms of remoteness,
Right.
that they're not a terrifically fun instrument to play. They could do some amazing things, but now the technology has not gone far enough, and it's not continued to be developed. It's too expensive.
Right.
And frankly, I'd rather go back to the supple acoustic jazz set.
Well, since it's the top of the hour, I just want to let people know that you're listening to WMBR in Cambridge at 88.1. We're first on your FM dial, and our guest in the studio today is Bill Bruford, a drummer formerly with Yes and King Crimson, and many solo projects over the years, and currently with Earthworks, who are playing tomorrow night at the Regatta Bar in Harvard Square for 2 shows. And I'm Eli Polonsky with Mighty Slim and Bill Bruford.
Should we go into a cut off the CD?
Sure, why not? I could play you one that so much of jazz is very serious, very internal looking, very psychotic, and you have to be deeply disturbed to kind of like it. But once in a while, it's nice to write a tune which really isn't about anything much at all, other than getting you to tap your foot. It just comes at you as a groove and something to bring a smile to your face. And this one's called Footloose and Fancy Free.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And that was from Bill Bruford's Earthworks' latest CD. And the name of that cut, Bill, was?
The name of the cut was Footloose and Fancy Free. And the album is called Apart and Yet Apart. I like these plays on words, you can tell that.
And who's in the band currently?
Well, we have an all-British band of some of the best young talent in London. I often think of myself not only as band leader and composer, but also talent scout. And I've tried to use the band's name and position to bring interesting young players to the States quite often, or at least out of England. And that's a tradition that dated back with Alan Holdsworth and Dave Stewart in the 70s when I ran a band then. And I think at that time most Americans were unfamiliar with Alan Holdsworth, the brilliant guitar player.
Right.
And then the first edition of Earthworks had 2 very good young British players, Django Bates on keyboards and E-flat horn, and Ian Bellamy on tenor saxophone. Currently we have on bass Mark Hodgson, and on soprano and tenor saxophones Patrick Clahar, who was just for a brief while was in an international hit band called Incognito. That was a sort of dance funk band. And on piano we have Steve Hamilton, who's Scottish but trained here at Berkeley. So he spent 4 years over the river, and this is his first trip back since then, actually.
I found this to be a really, really nice sounding recording. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on digital versus analog in regards to drumming?
Well, it doesn't bother me. Either one doesn't bother me. You know, I've got other problems. You know, it's just as long as I can hear it clear, that's fine.
Right.
You know, people talk about warmth and all that stuff. I find that a little bit, you know, from your ears, was that a digital or an analog recording, Eli?
Well, if someone made me decide, I would probably have to lean toward digital, but it's hard to tell. It really is.
And for you?
Oh, definitely digital.
Okay, well, there you go. You guys can tell.
But you know, I find a real, you know, sometimes I find in digital the high end can be kind of harsh sounding. I think they've come a long way. I mean, this CD has none of those problems.
Yeah, it's a real nice
sometimes
sounding CD. Sure, and there's something great about, you know, live 2-3 day albums. You know, I mean, I think we all got sick of tracking and layering and overdubbing, you know, which became so stultifying in the studio that. And this reached its kind of peak with me with a Yes record called Union, which appeared, I think, in '91, somewhere along those lines. And we'd had a bit of a reunion tour that year. Or perhaps just preceding the tour, they put out an album called Union, which was the most ghastly kind of mess of overdubs and edited and computer shifted stuff. And, you know, this thing took months and millions of dollars to make, and it's just like, why?
Right.
You know, and there's something about performance, which is at the heart of jazz, being in the moment.
Right.
Which means that your album's only going to take 2-3 days, because you can't go on playing these tunes forever.
Right.
You know, each tune, you're only going to run it 2 or 3 takes, and then you have it. So most of the tunes on here are first takes, you know.
Right.
And they're all untouched drum tracks. You know? I mean, you make a mistake, you make a mistake, and that's it.
And these were they all recorded live or separately? You did the track separately?
No, all the musicians stand in the room together, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and everybody plays.
Okay.
And what they play is a function of what other guys have played or are playing at that moment.
Right.
It's called jazz. You know. And in fact, King Crimson still, with its latest, well, its sort of return CD was called Thrack in about 1995 or something. Again, recorded exactly the same way, with 6 guys in the studio, all the amplifiers humming and crashing and making a lot of noise and doors slamming, and somebody counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and you all start playing.
Right.
And I think that's a good way to go if you can, you know, the music has a life that way.
Right.
That should be retained at all costs.
I know I've heard you state in an interview that along those lines, the jazz is sort of more of an organic, you know, sort of project in the works kind of way to play, as opposed to rock being a more kind of structured and everybody does the same thing all the time. No, I definitely didn't feel that way, and like you mentioned, King Crimson definitely didn't play that way.
No, it didn't. Crimson, there was quite a lot of jazz not in the notes of King Crimson, but in the ethics of the band.
Right.
There's quite a strong jazz attitude, actually, that the performance is really important, that the performance tonight will be different to the performance last night.
Right.
And the performance you get in Providence won't be the same as the one you get in Boston. These are, you know, old jazz ideas, you know, and I've always liked music that is like that, and I have no desire to go down any more of a computerized, formatted kind of way than I have to.
Right. Now, when you go in and record, do you have a definite idea of the way you want the drums to sound, or is that you pretty much leave that to the engineer to do his best? I always found, you know, I always wanted to mention this, that Eddie Offord really got a really great drum sound back in the old days.
Well, yeah, but he didn't get it. I got it.
Right.
Because I hit it.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Right.
and you can talk a lot too much science in this.
Right.
I mean, this is a microphone we're talking in. You put it down somewhere near the mic, and if I hit it, it'll record it to tape. It's not rocket science.
Right.
The drums you've just been listening to there is what I sound like when I set up my drums and hit them.
Right.
And you put some mics in a general area, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
You have to be really weird to kind of intervene and kill that.
Right.
you know, and turn it into something horrible and flat. You know, it's defies being messed around with. You know, I like to feel I have a sound, and that you give me any old set of drums now, and I'd be able to play them. You know,
Right.
that's the way I look at it.
Now you played with Alan Holdsworth for many years. What would you say would be obviously you enjoyed playing with him? What were things about Alan's playing that you
Oh, I
enjoyed?
loved Alan.
Obviously, he's a great player.
I loved Alan Holdsworth, a great jazz musician, and a demon on the electric guitar. And I think when I first came across him in the mid '70s, in '76 we had a CD with a band called UK. Perhaps it was '77, and I also had him in my own band for 2 or 3 CDs after that. So we worked quite a bit for 3 or 4 years together, you know.
Right.
But a wonderful player, I think, and everybody complained he played too fast, you know. But he liked John Coltrane anyway, so he wanted to sort of do on guitar what Coltrane did on the saxophone.
Right.
But it never seemed too fast to me. You know, there was something about the way he could still retain all the passion in the playing.
Right.
It didn't bother me that there were a lot of notes. I didn't mind that because the passion was still there. And he pretty much invented a thing with what they call the whammy bar. You know, the tremolo arm on the
Right.
guitar, making it sing and woo 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 woo.
Right.
That sort of sound that Alan did. And he was very keen on sound, you know. He had a very special thing and was forever wiring together amplifiers, you know. 5 minutes before we'd do on stage, it'd be 3 amplifiers all in bits, you know. And he'd be wiring them together, configuring them in some way to give him that sound he was looking for in his ears. And a magnificent player. And now he lives in California, makes his own records. But I think he's best in the company of other people myself. Like so many musicians, I think sometimes they're better with others than on their own.
Right. Now, a friend of mine wanted to ask. Now, when you compose, do you compose from? I guess he wanted to ask from the inside out, whether you hear something and try to get it down on paper, or maybe write something on a sheet and try to play it that way. How do you compose?
Yeah. It's a hard one. That there's the great 40s chanteur called Noel Coward in England, and I think it was he who said, when asked which comes first, the words or the music,
Right.
replied the gin and tonic, which I think is great. I start with a rhythm. Mostly I start with a rhythm pattern or a groove of some sort.
Right.
And then I do something really cheesy and just assign it some bass notes. Any old notes, doesn't matter at this point.
Right.
Then I give it any old harmony. Again, it doesn't really matter. And I just stab around quite a bit until I find something I like. It's highly unscientific. It's painfully slow. It's deadly hard work. I hate it. But I kind of need to do it in order to not be embarrassed when I call the other musicians over for a rehearsal, because what are they going to play if I don't have something for them to play?
Right.
So that's why, you know, they say being a musician is a lot like being a soldier. You know, it's 95% boredom and then 5% terror.
Right.
And I've always felt like that. You know, somehow when you've called good musicians over to your house to play, you get terrified. What are they going to play? You know, you have to have something for them.
Right. Shall we go into another cut from the CD?
Yeah, by all means. How about here's what they call in the trade a burn-up. You know, where one of the great things about jazz, I think, is that it had the energy, or it still can have the energy of punk music. You know, this ability to be flat out, where if you drop the needle in the middle of the track, you think, how did these guys ever get to do this? How did they ever get to where they are now in the track? Because the energy is so strong.
Right.
And some of the great punk music of the 70s had that, you know, this ability to just be flat out, balls to the wall, as they say. And this one creeps up on you, but its middle section is a real burner. It's really nice. And in common with the sort of crossword puzzle or crossword clue feeling to the titles of this is called Some Shiver While He Cavorts.
Spectacular. And that was Bill Bruford's Earthworks from the latest CD.
Yeah, it was called Some Shiver While He Cavorts. Some Shiver. Do you know what cavorting is?
I I can't say that I do.
You know, I speak in this foreign language, which is really a problem here in the United States, I know. To cavort is to kind of dance madly with insane intensity.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, you got to cavort once in a while.
Indeed. Any sort of an esoteric question? How do you think sort of drumming and growing as a musician on the drums has helped you off the kit?
Well, my wife would probably want to come in on this right now. How has it helped me off the kit? I don't know, but it's kind of important to have a life. You know, there's definitely something about guys who have lives who are sort of playing from experience, I think. And there is, particularly here in college, music college town of all towns, Boston, you know, and Los Angeles as well, you know, an insane intensity with which young guys hurry to give up any life they have and practice 13 hours a day, and stick their nose in those dots without realizing that music comes from somewhere. It comes from you as a human being.
Right.
And sometimes I curse my domestic life and say this is nothing but a drag. You know, how come I can't work 350 dates a year? I have 3 kids, for example. You know, you can't work 350 days a year. Therefore, I cannot compete around the United States with young guys who are going to play 350 days a year. But it doesn't bother me, you know, because you do have to be a person. You know, you have to have a life. The famous phrase, "Get a life." It's a good phrase,
right.
You know. And I think one-dimensional people are extremely boring, really. One of the best French jazz drummers, Daniel Humer, is a wonderful drummer, beautiful musician. But he also is a painter, and he is also a restaurateur. And he would list cookery as more important than painting, and painting more important than jazz drumming. You know, he's he has these 3 strong elements, you know. So his painting informs his cookery informs his drumming informs his painting. You get it?
Right.
So you are about something.
Right.
Right.
Well, we're talking with Bill Bruford today, and we have our construction team going in the background here. But
we're in the dentist's office.
Yeah. Bill Bruford is appearing tomorrow night at the Regatta Bar in Harvard Square for 2 shows, 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, with Bill Bruford's Earthworks. And I just found out that there are still some, actually there are some advance tickets available for the 10 o'clock show. The early show is sold out in advance, but a limited amount of tickets will go on sale at the door at 7 o'clock at the Regatta Bar. So that's the ticket situation with that. Bill Bruford tomorrow night and with Earthworks in Harvard Square at the Regatta Bar.
Bill, any future plans with Blue?
Future plans with Blue, which you're referring now to a band I have with Tony Levin,
yes.
Bruford Levin, Upper Extremities, which we played a couple of shows at the House of Blues.
Yeah, I saw that. They were fantastic.
Great. We came by twice quite rapidly, I think in the spring of last year and maybe the Christmas period of last year. Actually David Torn and Tony Levin, as we speak, are just finishing up a live album from the tours that band did. And there'll be 3 or 4 new tracks on that. And that will be out, actually I'm not sure in the United States, certainly going out in Japan quite shortly. But no doubt that'll be around sometime. So we have that. But aside from that, I think probably no more immediate live work. It's partly because everybody's too busy, and this guy, Chris Bodie, is a bit of a star as well.
Was he the trumpet player?
He's the trumpet player, right. Yeah, and he's on, you know, all over the cover of magazines, and he has Sting singing on his records, and he's out with Sting right now on the road. So we might not be able to get him anyway, even if we wanted to. I'm extremely busy with Earthworks.
With Earthworks, correct.
So there is a lot going on, you know, and it's very difficult to schedule these things, and sometimes they're scheduled a year, 12, 13 months in advance, which gets to be a drag. Like you're the Queen of England or something, you know. So I think no more of that. However, Earthworks, I anticipate we'll have a new record sometime, yeah. Hope to get round to that. But, you know, there's a lot of records out and about, and I think it's incumbent upon us musicians to be careful when we record, you know, and record only the best of what we have. You know, I don't think the world needs any more CDs just for the fun of it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That we're all drowning in music. Your library is stuffed. You know, you have CDs and records all over the place.
Right.
Wherever you go, there's too much music. Whenever you go to a record company, they say, "Don't bring me any more music." You know, we have enough music already. And there is very much that feeling around, I think. So musicians must be careful. When they make a CD, make only the best CD that you have. You know, don't make the one you're thinking about being good. Don't make the practice CD. Don't release the demo tapes. You know, make the CD, the one that says it absolutely, that's what you're about at that time.
Right.
Then give us a break for a year and a half, you know, so we can enjoy it.
And obviously, you have the freedom to not be sort of under those, you know, sort of record industry pressures. You got to get an album out. I don't care what it sounds like.
Well, I've never come across those pressures. I've only ever received from the record company, oh God, not another record from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the negative side. You know, they've never ever wanted to put out any record I've ever been on.
Right.
So I've never had that problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I record for Discipline Records, which is Robert Fripp's small record label, which is essentially for the friends and family of King Crimson, which is a great label, really interesting place to be. But no, there's no ownership problems there at all. You record when you want and only when you have something to say.
Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of modern jazz bands or modern...
I monitor other drummers professionally, you know, but drummers from other cultures all the time too. You know, I want to know what's going on in hip-hop. I want to know what's going on in rap. I want to know what Jeff Tain Watts is doing. I want to know what Bill Stewart's quartet is doing in New York. I want to know what Evelyn Glennie, the English classical percussionist, is doing. I'm a professional musician, so I monitor stuff.
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm going to do it or copy it or necessarily like it.
Right.
But it all goes somehow in the back of your head, you know, and it sits there like a soup.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even think about it, but eventually it comes out in your own playing in some way, I think. Everything you've ever heard. I listen to all sorts of music, but as I say, there's too much. You know, I'm drowning in CDs that guys give me, that record companies tell me to listen to, you know, that I'm trying to listen to. There's too much of it.
Mm-hmm. There's maybe one more. Whose idea was the sort of everybody gets a solo idea on Fragile?
Wow.
Even John Anderson got a solo.
Well, I have slightly different memory of that to other guys, and there's a very good book on Yes just come out by a guy called Chris Welch, a British writer. Really good book, excellent, and he's really researched it well, and it's absolutely like it was. But there's a slight discrepancy because people can't remember now who said what to who. But there was a debate that went on, and I remember this quite clearly. That John Anderson used to bully everybody into playing these parts, which was fine. And this conversation came up and said, look, any one guy here in this room could use this particular ensemble of musicians to his or his own end if he wanted to. Right. You know, it could have at any one time, any one of these guys could be a conductor. Could write a piece of music for these people and have them play it in the way, done, said Anderson. Sorted. Good idea. Let's do that. Everybody take the group, do what they want with it. Great, I said. And I did mine, had everybody playing. But that got misconstrued into everybody saying, oh, okay, I'll do a solo. That's not it at all. The point was to use the band members under direction from each of the individual guys to see what they would do. Right. For example, if you were in Yes, what would you have done with the band? What would you have told Squire to play? What would you have asked Anderson to sing? Right. That's what I did. I said, oh, this is what I'll have Wakeman play. This is what I'll have Squire play. You know, actually it was an instrumental. Mine was an instrumental. But that got misunderstood into being a series of solos, and that wasn't really the point of it. So there you go. That's my version on that.
And where did the title 5% for Nothing come from?
That related, and I regret that actually, to the manager we had, who had just been fired but had 5% of the band's earnings for life or something. Something like that. I can't quite remember the business. It was too crazy in those days.
Okay. Perhaps we might want to go into one more and then wrap it up. We're talking with Bill Bruford here.
Well, you're hearing music from this new CD that we have out by Earthworks, and it's called Apart and Yet Apart. Well, the title is really a reference to a feeling of being neither in one camp nor the other. You know, whenever you play jazz music, you're too like a rock guy. Whenever you play rock music, you're too like a jazz guy. You're apart, and you're apart. You're a part of King Crimson, but you're aside from it. You're a part of something, but yet you stand back from it. I've always felt like I'm neither rock, nor jazz, nor King Crimson, nor Yes, nor, you know, I'm me, I'm Bill.
Right.
So that's why the thing's called Apart and Yet Apart. And we're just going to finish here with a ballad off the back of the album called Dewy-Eyed Then Dancing.
And we'd like to thank you for coming down and spending some time with us. It's been quite an honor.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I guess two parting questions. What advice would you give to young, up-and-coming musicians, being someone who's involved in the thick of it? And
Well, don't do it unless you have to. That sounds kind of flippant, but there's something in that. You know, if you can do something else, do it. If you cannot do something else because you are so obsessed by music, do it.
Okay.
But I'd get out if you can, because it's no place for a nice person. You know, it's an ugly scene, the music scene, real ugly, and you'll need to be really a driven person to get something going, I think.
Okay. And I guess the question we often ask here in the States, Beatles or the Stones, Bill?
Oh, Beatles or the Stones, that's rough. McCoy Tyner.
That's a good option.
Fantastic. And on that note, I think we'll...
It's a great question, actually. I think you should start the interview with that, Beatles or Stones. And it's true, nearly everybody was one or the other, huh? But I was a jazz, you know, we listened to them both, but, gee, I kind of preferred McCoy Tyner. It's terrible, isn't it? It's pathetic.
I won't ask you Coltrane or Kenny G. I'll leave that to the next guy. And just say thank you for coming down. And once again, Bill Bruford will be playing tomorrow night at the Regatta Bar, doing 2 shows. And Eli, what are the specifics on that again?
The 2 shows are 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and the 8 o'clock is sold out in advance. They'll be putting a limited amount of tickets on sale at the box office at 7 o'clock, just an hour before the show time, and advance tickets are still available for the 10 o'clock show tomorrow night at the Regatta Bar.
We might want to add that if you have any difficulty getting in at all or can't make it Wednesday night, we are in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right.
On Thursday night at a room called The Call, Elbow Street, Providence, Rhode Island. We'll be there on Thursday night.
Okay, very good.
Okay, well, thank you for coming down, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Bye-bye.